Hi, I'm JP, you're watching the Coffee Channel, and today we're talking about budget espresso setups, specifically those that are under £200. Now, for many years, this has been pretty much an impossibility. Espresso machines under £200 are generally pretty poor, and you need a grinder as well. And the grinder is probably the most important aspect of this, and you'd never get anything decent together with an espresso machine for under £200. It's just an impossibility. You'd end up with absolutely terrible tasting espresso. In recent years though, we've got Nespresso compatible machines. Now, they don't produce something that's exactly the same as espresso, but they produce something that's approximating espresso and is better than anything you get with a separate espresso machine and grinder for the same sort of money. Now, one of the problems in the past has been that the only Nespresso capsules you were able to use were Nespresso ones. And these, as I've said in other videos, are actually pretty poor. They're quite dark roast coffee. The actual quality of the coffee is not great. They don't produce anything like a specialty type espresso. But in recent years, many specialty roasters have been producing their own Nespresso compatible pods, which leads us to what I think is the best bang for buck machine on the market. I'm going to tell you about what's good about it and what's bad about it now. This is the Opal One. So you've been able to buy Nespresso machines like this one for many years now, and they all use very similar underlying technology. One of their main features is a very small boiler that heats up very quickly, which is very important when you're making espresso at home, because you don't want to wait for 20 minutes like you would with a commercial machine to make your coffee. Really, you want to be able to make it straight away. Secondly, obviously, they don't require a grinder, which is a big deal because they've got a very small footprint and they fit into a kitchen really easily, and you don't have to have another grinder taking up space where you would do with a machine and a separate grinder. Your kitchen, you've lost unit space straight away. The espresso machine, it's very small, it's very convenient. Now, a lot of purists don't necessarily like them because they say you can't choose the coffees so easily to go in them, but there's actually quite a range of coffees available from specialty roasters these days. So you've got Kelowna, you've got Horsham, you've got Origin. We've done a test on all these pods in another video on YouTube on our channel if you want to take a look at it. But for today, we're going to be trying it out with these Kelowna pods. Now, this is a specialty grade coffee. It's exactly the same coffee as you can buy as beans from their website, and which you'll find in specialty coffee shops around the country. And it's really simple to use, so you don't need to worry about dialing it in, you don't need to worry about your grind size, you don't need to worry about anything apart from putting decent water in and getting the machine set up correctly, which is really pretty simple. So let's have a look at it and see how it works. I'll show you a few of its advantages, and there are a couple of little flaws that we've noticed using it over the last few days or so. Okay, so first of all, pretty easy, plug it in, switch it on, you've got a switch at the side there. And then you've just got to wait for a few seconds. These blinking lights here to go solid. Now, if you want to set the temperature, you can do that by switching the machine off and then switching it back on and holding these two buttons here. It will start to blink, and then if you press the right hand button, that will give you the hottest temperature. Now, this is a specific feature of this machine. It can brew at high temperatures, and high temperatures are required for lighter roast specialty coffees that are in the specialty coffee pods. Other Nespresso machines don't have this functionality. They don't have the ability to adjust the temperature. They don't have the ability to brew at the higher temperature, which is a big disadvantage really, because actually they won't taste quite as good with the specialty pods, which require a higher temperature because they're a lighter roast, harder to extract, and the higher temperature gives you a much better extraction of your pod. So that's one feature this has that others don't. The other thing it has is a silicone brewing chamber, which stops any leaking and ensures you get a good even extraction from your pod. So those are the two main things. Now, one thing I do when I set up my machine is I always set it up for 25 grams of coffee on the short button, which is this button on this side on the left. Normal pods like this, short espresso pods from most specialty roasters, are designed for 25 grams of coffee coming out. So what we need to do is we need to put the capsule in to the machine. And what you would have heard is an old capsule falling down that we've used before. Push this down like so. And we're going to take out the drip tray because that will leave a space for scales. And you only need to do this once when you first program in the machine. Pull down the spout, put your cup in front of it, zero your scales, and then you hold down the button that you want to use as your short espresso button. In this case, I always use the one on the left, the 25 gram button, that's programmed out of the box at 25 grams, but these machines aren't always that precise. So I'm going to program it myself. I'm going to hold it down until we get to 18 grams of coffee. Why am I holding it down for 18 grams of coffee? Well, it's because once you stop it, there's still quite a lot of residual coffee in there that pours through. So 18 grams will probably end up being 25 grams when we actually make it. So I'm going to hold it down. Initially, you won't really hear anything. It'll seem like nothing's happening. But in a minute, you'll hear a brewing sound. And I'm going to keep holding it down until the scales show 18 grams of coffee. Then I'm going to let go. And as you see, there's the espresso coming out. Okay, so we're up to 4 or 5 grams. That's 10 grams. Nearly there, nearly there. I'm going to stop it now. Okay, and there's going to be a bit of dripping going on here. As you see, a few drips. And then maybe we'll just shake that a bit to get rid of the drips. Because remember, we haven't got the drip tray in. So when we take the cup away, we don't want any residual espresso left in there. Okay, we'll take that off now and put the drip tray back in. Now, the next time you use your machine, once it's set up like that, it should give you the 25 grams just by pressing that button once. It should automatically give you around 25 grams. Now, we'll talk about a few issues with this later, which I'll show you. But let's taste the espresso first. Now, when I said that you get something approximating espresso earlier, I meant what I said. What you get from an espresso machine isn't espresso. It's something a bit like espresso, and it's the nearest thing you can get to espresso for under £200. What it isn't is anywhere near as thick and viscous as an espresso, because you've only got 5 grams of coffee in each capsule, and you're putting out an output of 25 grams in the short version of an espresso pod. So what that means is it's like 5 times ratio of your end coffee to what you've put in. Now, with a typical espresso made on a machine like our La Marzocco here, we'd usually use something like 16 grams of coffee in, or maybe 18 grams of coffee, and then put 32 or 36 grams out, maybe a little bit more. So it'd be somewhere near a 2-to-1 ratio. And if you had a ristretto, the ratio would even be lower than that, so it might be 1.5 to 1. So it's a much thicker beverage, and there's a lot more coffee in it when you have an actual espresso rather than a Nespresso espresso. But you do get most of the experience of an espresso. It's not like a filter coffee where it's quite a thin, low TDS drink. It's still a fairly viscous drink. It's short. It's got the kind of complexity and the short, sharp punch of an espresso. So let's have a little try of it and see what we think. Okay, so that's come out really well. It's got like a bit of candied orange in there maybe. Nice nutty flavour. It's really sweet. It's like making maybe a lungo on a normal coffee machine. So it's giving you lots of kind of complexity, and there's not so much sort of strength to it that will overpower you. What you don't get is that big kind of hit of viscous espresso, but it's not far off, and it's a heck of a lot better than you get with an espresso machine that costs any less than really about £500. Okay, so this time I'm going to make a second coffee, and I'm going to see how well the program dose matches up in terms of accuracy with the 25 grams that we programmed in. So we'll put a fresh pod in, close the lid, remove the drip tray because we're going to use the scales again, pull the spout down, zero our scales and press the short button. Now, what we found is that it does vary quite a bit. But we'll see what happens this time and see whether it's particularly accurate or not accurate at all. Okay, so we're hitting the 3 gram mark. Bit of splashing going on there, unfortunately. Always an occupational hazard with espresso. We're hitting, coming up to 18 grams, so it should be kind of stopping about now, but it's kind of decided to keep going. And okay, so what have we got there? Right, we've got about 33 grams, so that's quite a large extra amount of coffee. 8 grams on 25 grams, that's like a third longer. And running all that extra water through the coffee means it's going to extract more. Now, Nespresso pods run on a very high extraction. They're very evenly ground on very expensive grinders when the coffee's put into the pods. So the extraction is very, very even. So the extraction rate is much higher than you generally get on something like an EK43 in a coffee shop. So if you make that extraction longer by putting more water through it and extracting more from the coffee, you're potentially getting over extraction. So we're going to let this cool a little bit first and then we're going to taste it, because 8 grams more going through it is quite a significant amount. So let's see what we get. Well, it smells pretty much the same as the first coffee. As you can see, it's a longer beverage. It's nowhere near a sort of espresso anymore for a single shot, which effectively an espresso is kind of. It's a lot longer than you expect to get from 5 grams of coffee. It's more like a lungo really in terms of its ratio of coffee to finished beverage. Let's see what it tastes like. Okay, so it's not really over extracted. It's just a little bit over extracted, but the main quality of it is that it's actually a little bit too thin, a bit too watery, which you don't really want. Now, how can we solve this problem? Well, the only way we can really solve it is to manually use the machine each time with a set of scales. It's not ideal, but it's not the end of the world. I'm not sure if this is just a bad machine we've got or a slightly misfunctioning machine, but what I found in the past that volumetrics on even quite expensive coffee machines, like our La Marzocco here, like my Keys Van der Western I had in my shop years ago, are never actually that accurate. What I mean by volumetrics is a mechanical mechanism that's electronically controlled that actually controls the amount of liquid going through based on volume. Modern coffee machines, the very latest models, usually do it with gravimetric control, which is basically they're using scales. And that seems to be the best way to do it. And even they struggle with things, because obviously there's always a little bit of coffee in the portafilter falling down into the coffee cup after the machine cuts it off. So you're not going to know exactly how much is there at any given point. So even they are not accurate to more than about 1 gram or 2 grams, which is still a fair amount. I can probably do better myself, to be honest, by manually pressing the button and letting go of it, which you can do with this machine. On a machine costing £130 like this, you can't really expect it to have perfect volumetrics that work better than a £7,000 commercial espresso machine. So that is one of the little flaws with it that you have to actually take account for. And I'd say do it manually, buy yourself some scales. You can get smaller ones than this that might even fit on the drip tray actually. So it's not the end of the world. And just hold in the button each time and cut it off manually, and then you'll get exactly the correct espresso each time then. Bit of a hassle, but it's worth the effort. The other thing, like all Nespresso machines, I'd say, you need to put decent water in. I generally recommend something like a peak water filter. You can see our review on our YouTube channel, look up peak water. That's going to be the best thing to put into this machine if you're using specialty coffee, I'd say. You can take the water hardness of your area and you can soften it slightly. You can let the bicarbonates through, let some of the magnesium through, but take out some of them that are buffering and making the coffee taste worse. That's going to make a big improvement to your coffee with one of these. So it's only a case of what you put in has got to be good. Otherwise you're not going to get good results with this. Is there anything better than this for the same money? I'd say no. Other Nespresso machines have exactly the same problems with the volumetrics not working as well, but they don't have the increased temperature, the ability to extract lighter roast coffees better. They don't have the silicone brewing chamber, which I think gives a more even extraction. So, would I buy one? Well, yes, I have done actually. I think it's the best Nespresso machine on the market. It's not bad money, it's $129.99 in most outlets. You might be able to find it a bit cheaper. It might have got more expensive with the current inflationary pressure, but it's going to be around that price. And it's small, it's convenient, there's plenty of availability of pods from specialty roasters for it. Doesn't make much of a mess. You're not going to get coffee grounds all over your kitchen. You're not going to end up with a new hobby, which is, like James Hoffman says, is what happens when you buy a big espresso machine, a grinder, and try getting into coffee that way. This way is a convenient way if you're kind of wanting to sneak into the coffee experience but not commit to making it effectively a new hobby. So, good deal. Grab one now if that's the sort of thing you want. We'll be looking at more expensive espresso machines in the future. We'll be looking at what your budget gets you when you go up to maybe £500 or £1,000. If you like the video, like, subscribe to our channel, and I'll see you next time.